Hello everybody, welcome. Those of you who are familiar with my work know that I'm not really busy or interested in blowing my own horn and etc. But what I hope that you'll find here on my channel are some living mirrors, some doorways to the origins of our nature, intelligence, and potential that will unlock some cages that we've all been stuck in, that our ancestors were trapped in, that every human being that ever drew breath hoped to find a key to. A vector that would jailbreak the bullshit systems that are eating our planet, history, and future. And if that's part of your interest, well, strap in, because we're going to go to the sky together right now. Yeah, you guys got it right. We are trained to make a variety of fundamental mistakes. And from childhood onward, by our parents and peers, by the people who are supposed to be educating us, by the people who are wearing the costumes of our liberators, of messiahs, of noble warriors, of extreme altruists. They are chaining our feet to the floor. They are cutting off our wings and stapling them to the fucking chalkboards in the one place that we are supposed to be able to acquire the keys. Our schools, the universities. What the hell is meant by university? It literally is supposed to be the city of the universe, right? The place where all of the intelligences in time-space come together to sing and speak and show and remind us, to resurrect our divine memories of our origins, natures, and potentials. And what do we get instead? Prison bars. We are trained to reiterate in thought, expectation, speculation, and evaluation a variety of catastrophic errors that if you make any one of them, you'll build bars every time you make a move, and if you make three, you will be a slave. So I want to talk about some of these errors. It's a little windy here today. I've got my mic buffer on. We should be in good shape. I guess we'll find out on the far side of this arc. So one of the most profound of these errors is that you're merely human. Right. Don't expect too much of me. I'm only human after all. Well, let me be really clear about what being human actually looks like. If you took the magical, supranormal powers of every physicalized intelligence on Earth, the octopus, the whale, the dolphin, the bat, the praying mantis, the crane, the rattlesnake, the electric eel, the turtle, the crocodile, the mouse, the mole, the eagle, the hawk, the kestrel. If you unified All those beings, all of the beings, the forests, the coral reefs, the nudibranchs, the plankton, if you unified all the intelligences and forms and abilities of those beings, and then you mated that with the angels, the devas, the jinn, the daimons, the gods, that's what you were born as. There's nothing mere about your humanity. There never was, there never will be, except that you are convinced of your fundamental impoverishment according to principles that have nothing to do with who and what and how you came to be incarnate here on earth. So one of the first mistakes is that you're only human, and if you don't believe me, watch the hundreds of thousands, the millions of people who escape that bond and directly show you the impossible. The 5-year-old 280 note per minute shredding guitar player from Korea. The ballerinas, the runners, swimmers, the athletes, the dancers, the singers, the occasional scientists, the mathematicians, the seers, the healers, the real ones, not the mimics. Watch the dogs and the cats, the dragonflies, because they'll give you hints at the vast terrain of the more than merely human you came here to be and become. That little seemingly weak, seemingly delicate body you have is capable of things as yet unimagined by human beings, let alone achieved. And that will always be the case because the actual scope of our potential, nature, origin, and the urgent imperatives we bring to human birth is infinite. It is a layered array of infinities. And when you see someone doing something that appears superhuman, what you're seeing is merely a hint at that depth. A hint. To imagine what an actual statement would look like is nearly impossible for us. An actual expression of that infinite potential could move the planet in a moment, could move human history in an instant. That's your potential. However divorced we may feel or think ourselves to be from it. So the first common thing we're taught is a series of limitations that are cognitive, intellectual, spiritual, physical, ideological, and relational, that have nothing to do with our nature. They have to do with an agenda, a program, a process, an array of protocols that have long dominated human culture and experience, and particularly human collectivity. These protocols render us into helpless slaves, eager for any distraction from the agonies we feel at the impoverishments we cannot understand, the origins or the opposites of. And those opposites are our birthrights. They are not our birthrights in the sense that someone's supposed to defend you having them, although that would be fabulous. No, there's something very different. They are the innate necessities of our human nature and our more than human nature, potential, urgency, ache, desire. And we get sold counterfeits: sex, drugs, rock and roll, violence, commerce, commodification, objectification, representations, video games. We get sold video games And you don't need computers to run these. They were running them on humans back when the conquistadors ripped and shredded the American continent, the South American continent, and later the colonizing forces of Europe landed here and obliterated wholesale the native indigenous populations here. Those conquistadors were infected with the disease before they brought it here and reinstanced it, and we are subject to those same fucking deletions and impoverishments here today. We are a self-colonizing nightmare of new ways to colonize the population per second, and to stack up representations of value in banks, representations of power in corporations and governments and the military-industrial complex. We frack the souls of our children to build monuments to despair. And these we worship. Don't know who we is. Perhaps the we I mean here is the absentee we of our possible intentional collectivity. The absence that appears as a presence, which is one of the most devastating ploys and one of the most terrifying features of our human experience and lives. It's literally what we see in the horror films. Right? We see absences appearing as presences. This is what drives our cultures, if we could call them that, and we shouldn't. We should just call them diseases. The military-industrial complex, our political systems, our legal systems, and our corporations. So this is one of the first lies, that you are merely human. The second lie that you're taught is a lie of transference. And let me frame this lethal fiction so that you can recognize it in your own consciousness, behavior, and the ideation and desperation of your fellow humans all around you. There's a comforting continuity to what we call physical reality, which I'm going to suppose is about 1% of what's actually going on. And it's the fact that your shoes will probably be where you left them last night. The silverware doesn't rearrange itself in the drawer. The ice cubes are still frozen when you take them out of the refrigerator. The money in the bank mostly stays there unless stolen. That tree you saw on your walking route yesterday is there again today, unless some idiotic arborist, in a desperate effort to justify their pay, ripped it from the earth and chopped it up into, sawdust or something similar, which happens a lot here where I walk in the park. That continuity, that reliable, unchanging, because of how we are in time, it's unchanging, right? The stone is still the stone tomorrow. The tree is still there. We believe, we feel most of our lives that we are immortal, even though we are aware of the possibility of death, and we may have encounters with death. It's our relationship to temporality that convinces us that the compelling continuity of physical objects in space and their organizations is the most trustworthy fact, absolutely reliable, not ambiguous. We don't have to watch over the little stone, the boulder, the mountain They will be there every day. And that brings us a kind of comfort because humans have these drivers. We can be understood to have these drivers orienting our awareness and concern, 3 of them. Ambiguity, vigilance, prediction. Increases in ambiguity spin up our vigilance. We're constantly concerned about prediction. This is why we live in dead boxes, because any reduction in ambiguity releases us from vigilance, and thus we turn from prediction to opportunism, which we certainly prefer to the burdens that prediction places on us, particularly predictions about negative future events. Events that are undesirable, painful, impoverishing, injuring, isolating, so forth. So these 3 drivers underlie human concern and awareness, how we forge our awareness, what we forge it for, how we direct it in consciousness. And the fiction here is that the staggering predictability of physical reality, objects in space, should be transferred onto the rest of existence, so that we presume that the structured continuity of physical space is the prototype of everything else. Everything else is just like that structured continuity and should be understood that way. This is what leads to materialistic models in science. It's what leads to physicalist reductionism in philosophic thought. The transfer of the expectation of structured continuity from physical reality to all other aspects of existence. Now think carefully about this error, because it's very subtle and largely invisible to us unless we concern ourselves with it. Unless we float it on the waters of thought, it will remain invisible, and we will just make the presumptions that, for example, my friend Joe is always my friend Joe. That I know Joe. That I know who Joe is. And you can see what's going on here, right? Because if I claim to know who my friend Joe is, part of the claim I'm making is that there's little ambiguity. I'm not subject to ambiguity as regards Joe, right? I know who Joe is. I can predict how Joe will likely respond to a question or situation. I have properly evaluated Joe due to our long association. Joe is a stable, continuous structure in existence. Nothing like this is or was ever or could be true. Ancient peoples were aware of this problem. They had discovered that the capacity for descriptive or denotative language was fraught with prisoneering perils that would obliterate our relationships and humanity, turn us into slaves and prisoners, if we simply obeyed their structure. So they learned to not do that, right? They learned to preserve awareness, potential, opportunity, creativity, play, transformation, wonder, integrity, honor, respect, awe. They preserved these above all the structured comforts of representational cognition and labeling language. They knew their lives and cultures depended on it. And when they met the colonizers, they thought, they expected, they predicted that these highly intelligent, apparently technologically advanced humans would necessarily understand and enact the same principles that trusted them. How tragic. None of us would think that presuming that our parents loved us and were loving and kind, that our parents had agendas that would destroy us, ruin our spirits, wreck the many forms of flight we are capable of, flight into the outer space of ordinary humanity. It's very interesting. These two women are directing their rowboat with separate oars, whereas nearly everyone else, one person rows with both oars at once so that the boat goes fairly straight. I like their intelligence. I like the daring of their experiment. So we transfer the expectation of physical continuity onto identity. And you can see in the strange and partly lethal backwaters of identity politics and gender politics a nascent awareness of the dangers of presuming the continuity or predictability of gender or identity. Problem is, with that, is it should remain actually fluid, and once you militarize that domain, you're going to suffer ironic collapsings, right? And misunderstandings and prosecutions and indictments and all of this really dangerous distraction from liberation. So the first lethal fiction is that you're merely human. This doesn't mean that you get to just make shit up and become like a woo goddess. The people who walk around saying that they're kings and queens because they have a male or a female body, or they are goddesses, or whatever. Without access to the more than merely human domains of our nature is dependent on various kinds of integrity and humility. If you're arrogant and you celebrate arrogance and pump up, inflate your personal identity and your ego, the universe will grind you up and spit out the little bits of tooth and bone that remain, with very few exceptions. So I personally, there's a lot of wind here right now. There could be some noise, even though I have the mic buffer on, so bear with me. I have no patience for this kind of nonsense myself. If you find it attractive or interesting, well, see if it serves you. It's the opposite of what I'm talking about. Integrity means honesty. And yes, we are vastly more than human, but to that more is in service of the history and future of all beings. It's not in service to the preservation of Darren's name or my individual prosperity or wealth. We can see in our cultures another terrifying fiction, which is that the goal is the fulfillment of individual, egoic, personal desires and liberations from cultural structures via catastrophic wealth. That's a game, that's a vampiric game where the death and suffering of billions of others builds up fortunes in individual and corporate bank accounts. The fiction there is that it's the personal identity and individual fulfillment of a single human being that is the most valuable thing, the righteous thing, the thing you're supposed to do, the thing that if you don't do, someone else will, the race to the bottom, perverse incentives, all of this. That leads to dead planets and nightmares, tyrants, and false demigods. Bezos, Musk, Epstein, Maxwell, the US military-industrial complex, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, the swarming list of lethal vampiric nightmares just keeps exploding into new malignant mutations, each one more powerful and accelerated than the last. It's Cancer Protocol. But the fiction is that the endless unfulfillability of individual identity and power is righteous, appropriate, and true. This is the opposite of what I'm saying. Real fulfillment has its root in a kind of divine equanimity. Not the concept of equality, not lip service. And equalities isn't even the right idea. It's flowing transcendental mutuality. You know. Fame is so often a devastating and miserable outcome of the developmental potentials of a human being. And many of the famous have painfully come to understand this at absolutely terrifying prices. I have an essay called The Factories of Emptiness about this on my Medium page. There's a lot of cheering up on top of the Strawberry Hill here. So yeah, that's one of the fictions that personal fulfillment. Now look, there's no problem with, fundamentally, there's no problem with lift your boat and bring the tide that raises all the boats around you. If it actually raises them, and if that commitment doesn't become compromised as it becomes more successful, right? We can see historically, Google's mandate, "Don't be evil," became the opposite of their mandate. And presently, you have a slavering, drooling malignancy at the top of the food chain, just obliterating the history and future of humanity and nature and so forth, while pretending to a greatness that can't be had by villains. Yet can be mimicked. The fourth fiction, that we are trapped on a backwards planet called Earth. The humans are certainly backwards. Our cultures are insane, nightmarish monsters. They're not human. We'll get to that shortly as the fifth fiction. But what I want you to understand is that this is all the worlds. All of the intelligences in time-space, meaning in the future, and in every place in the universe, are accessible from here. This is a transceiver. The forms you see around you of the organisms, the microorganisms, the viruses, all these things, the plants, the forests, the hyperstructures of organismal synergy that we refer to with the term ecologies. These are instancings of the forms and modes of cooperative transcendence throughout time-space. Everything you could possibly imagine or want is directly accessible from right here, your body, right where you're sitting. Nothing requires travel. And travel can quickly become ironic and the opposite of, productive of the opposite of what travel hopes for. The gurus and yogis know what I am saying. We imagine that when Buddha says, I have remembered, I've had the anamnesis of my million previous lifetimes, we presume that what he may have meant was a linear anamnesis backward in time, right? It occurs to no one, nearly no one, that what he meant was something more like all these lives here, all these lives alive now, all these lives that have been previously alive. These are my spirit, they are my mind, they are my body. They are my mother, they are my father. They are my children. They are my dreaming. They are my love. What's actually going on here is, first of all, incomplete. So the language is wrong. There isn't anything actually going on, because the idea that there are things that are actually the case is a result of that first fiction, the transfer of the continuity of physical objects in space to all other domains of being. It's not true. Much of what is going on is not a state. It's an array of transforming potentials synergistically producing the appearance of a stable situation. That appearance is false. It is another of the fictions, the appearance of a stable situation. Not true. Deceptive, slave-making nonsense in consciousness. Useful for very pragmatic concerns and purposes, right? I want to build a bed out of wood. Useful, right? Stable state, mind, yeah? I want to shoot a bullet and kill my neighbor. Useful, right? I don't want that, but if somebody has this desire, right? Useful. useful for war, useful for commerce, useful for allopathic medicine, the kind we use doctors and hospitals to purvey, useful for mechanistic science, engineering, computation, so forth. Lethal to our actual potentials in origin when implemented by dissociated, insane processes that have captured our collectivity and expectation. So this is all the worlds. When a child is born here, it is just as if you gave them a UFO, right? It's just like the story of Superman, where Kal-El, knowing that his world is about to be destroyed by earthquakes due to transformations in the local and stellar environment, puts his child, their child, into a spacecraft and sends it to Earth to grow and be born here. That is the story of every human child on this world. We come from space-time. This planet is all the worlds. When a child is born here, what they will traverse in existence is very similar to, it's not similar, it's the hyperstasis, it's the superposition over what would happen in an actual spaceship sent to another planet that was, inhabited by something, right? This world is all the worlds. Your travel here is travel in space-time. It appears local. It isn't local. There's nothing local about it. Or rather, the fragment of it which is reliably local is, again, perhaps, it's less than 1%. It's very reliable, that less than 1%. As far as expectation, ambiguity, and prediction goes, seems like it's made of concrete, that 1%. It's super reliable, but wildly incomplete. And so too are the natures and potentials of our human lives, which appear to be individual yet are not. They are for the sake of all beings. We incarnate for the sake of all beings, as well as our own sake. We come here on heroic missions that are quickly forgotten as we are indoctrinated in modernity's languages and in actions of enculturation. So, this is the fourth fiction. This is all the worlds. A lifetime here is a transit through space-time, encountering many other worlds, many other universes, becoming other worlds and universes, together, with and for each other, and the history and future of all beings, and the sake of their liberation from pain and suffering and impoverishment. It doesn't look that way on the surface. It looks like the opposite. We come here to participate in pain, suffering, enslavement, and impoverishment of ourselves and others. We torture the animals, we buy meat at the grocery store, all of these things. They are bad. Of course they are bad. For those of us that live in cities, they are sort of necessities. So the city starts the problem. You can see that the problem begins at the collective level and is transmitted into the personal level, order or register, if you will. There's going to be some wind for a minute while I wander around this. Maybe I'll pause and reflect on the fifth fiction. Okay, the fifth fiction is that aggregates of human collectives are people. That the government is a person, that the corporations are persons. There was a catastrophic data breach at AT&T recently, and I read nonsense language in the media. The privacy of our clients is our fundamental concern. We're filled with regret, and so forth. We heard similar nonsense from Boeing, whose catastrophic commercial grifting and cheating resulted in the deaths of hundreds of people We hear the same nonsense from ExxonMobil when, some pipeline bursts and vast portions of the ocean are obliterated by poison. We hear this nonsense constantly. Trump pretends to be a human being with a political identity, when in fact, he's just a fucking parasite. Right? He's a highly advanced parasite. And others will say, well, Biden's even worse. Okay, right. I doubt it, but it's, it doesn't really matter. The point is, fictional humans aren't humans. Corporations can't have emotions. They don't have regret. They don't have compassion. They don't have altruism. Small groups of humans can express altruistic gestures as collectives. Small groups of humans can be human until they're captured by commerce or power in the market, and then it's basically just straight up monsters. Lying, right? But what I want to be really clear about is that representations of human collectivity that are dead inside cannot have emotions. And when they say we regret, they're just fucking lying. It's impossible for Google to regret something, right? It's impossible for them to feel shame. They don't have emotions. When they say they're expressing emotions, they are lying, straight up lying. There's no such thing as that. Corporations are not people. They don't have rights. They can't be imprisoned. There's no real structure to shut them down when they behave omnicidally or catastrophically or viciously or just profiteeringly. Right? I mean, everybody's just going to say, like, look, this is a war over profit. As long as we win the war, whatever you can get away with goes. And damn the graveyards of children. Who cares? Right? You see the same kinds of thing going on in the countries that are at war right now. They don't care about human beings at all. They have some principle or idea in mind, some protocol that they're enacting as they slaughter children and women and fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and whole lineages of human history, just obliterating them. They think they have an argument in favor of this? What possible argument could a human being have for that? None. If they were human, they could not do that. So the idea that our collectives are intelligently oriented or humane or human or trustworthy or worthy of our service or attention or authorization is bullshit. The fifth fiction. Now, there are many more fictions. They all have to do with limitations. That you're not telepathic. That you are telepathic. Both are fictions. The actual path between them is intimacy, not declaration. Right? Intimacy. Sensitive mutual synergy for noble and amnoetic, unforgetting purposes, to remember together, to rediscover the potentials and natures of our origins and intelligences, our transcendent aspects, the beyond of the human that we came here to bring into physical reality, to catalyze, to impregnate, to fertilize, to potentiate here on Earth. There are many more fictions. Now, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to take the fictions I presented here and invert them in your consciousness, evaluation, thought, behavior, relationships, experiments, arts, creativity, remembering, dreaming, adoring, awakening experience. If you know the falsehoods, you can forge the keys, and if you know 2 or 3 of them, you can forge a very powerful key. I've given you 5 here today. There are many more. We will continue to explore them together. We were born to unforget the ways and beauty and shining holy origins of our nature, potentials, and the missions that we incarnate to pursue together. Let us not forget them. Let us never counterfeit them. Let us correct wherever we begin to forge biases or declarative errors. Right? Let us not know, but learn. Let us not tell, but see together for each other. In any situation where we have the agreement to see better rather than to defend the books of our previous thought, concern, belief, and bias, wherever we shall agree to see better together for the sake of each other and our world, we will succeed. The 6th fiction is that we are alone in the universe. We are not alone here on Earth, but we are nothing like alone in the universe. Our people were born in intimate symbiotic relationship with non-human intelligences. First, those here around us on Earth, or perhaps first those in the sky that may have actually forged our forms, because we are certainly not the result of merely natural mechanical evolution on Earth. No chance of that. The 6th fiction is that we are alone. And the 7th is that you are alone. The universe is filled with anciently astonishing transcendent minds, and they participate directly in the formation of living worlds. Without them, you would not be able to understand my language. You would not have anything like a mind. In order to have a mind, you have to be touching the basis of the transcendent origin of consciousness. And that's a link that can never be broken. Never. It might perhaps be briefly interrupted. If it were interrupted for long, everything that you understand as you would permanently be gone. And I don't think that's even possible. So, the 6th fiction is that humans are alone. The 7th is that you are alone. There's no chance of that. The 8th is that we're the dominant form of life on Earth. We are certainly the most dangerous and lethal form of life on Earth. And in the sense of being omnicidally dissociated from lived relation with nature. If that's what dominance means, then we're dominant in that sense. And we are dominant in the sense that we can destroy everything here without too much trouble. But we are not the dominant form of life. The dominant form of life is probably cells, bacteria, protozoa, single-celled animals, protists, and so forth. And in terms of number, the dominant form of life is probably viruses. So these are the fictions I will outline today. I hope you find them useful and medicinal. Insightful and helpful, inspiring. In learning to see them, we can begin to forge their opposites in thought, concern, consciousness, relation, and behavior. In that direction lies the hope of the future of our species and world. I'm so grateful to have this time together. Thank you for joining me. Take a moment to like or share or ask a question in the comments. Please support my work if you find it helpful or amusing, inspiring. I look forward to learning together again very soon. May your ways and lives and dreams and relations be beautiful and profound. Bye-bye for now.